Have you ever heard of a disease so deadly it claimed hundreds of millions of lives, scarred countless more, and shaped the course of human history? I'm talking about smallpox. Today, it's a word most of us only encounter in history books, but for millennia, it was one of humanity's greatest fears. Let's journey back in time to understand this formidable foe and celebrate one of public health's most incredible victories. The story of smallpox begins thousands of years ago. Evidence suggests it first emerged in ancient Egypt, with telltale rashes found on mummified remains, including that of Pharaoh Ramses V. From there, it spread across the globe with trade, migration, and war. It was caused by the variola virus, a relentless and highly contagious pathogen. So, how did it spread? The virus traveled through the air in tiny droplets when an infected person coughed, sneezed, or even just talked. It could also live on contaminated objects like bedding or clothing for a surprisingly long time. This made it incredibly difficult to contain, especially in crowded cities. Once someone was infected, the disease followed a brutal and predictable pattern. After an incubation period of about 1 to 2 weeks, where the person felt perfectly fine, the first symptoms would appear: high fever, chills, headache, and severe body aches. It felt like a really bad flu. But this was just the beginning. A few days later, the signature rash would emerge. It started as small red spots, first in the mouth and on the face, then spreading all over the body within 24 hours. These spots weren't just a rash, they developed into fluid-filled blisters called pustules. Imagine your entire body covered in these painful, hard, round sores. It was agonizing. For those who survived, these pustules would eventually scab over and fall off, but they often left deep, permanent scars known as pockmarks. For many survivors, these scars were a lifelong reminder of the ordeal. But scarring was the least of the worries. Smallpox had a terrifyingly high mortality rate. The most common form, variola major, killed about 30% of the people it infected. That's nearly 1 in 3. And for those who survived, the complications could be severe. Blindness was common, as the pustules could form on the corneas. Other long-term effects included arthritis and bone infections. It was a truly devastating disease. Throughout history, smallpox has been a major player in world events. It's believed to have contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire and decimated populations across Asia and Europe in recurring epidemics. But its impact was perhaps most catastrophic when it was introduced to the Americas by European colonizers in the 15th and 16th centuries. The indigenous populations had no prior exposure to the virus, and therefore no natural immunity. The disease swept through the Aztec and Inca empires like a wildfire, wiping out up to 90% of the population in some areas. It was a demographic disaster that fundamentally altered the course of history on the continent, arguably more effective than any army. For centuries, humanity felt helpless against this scourge. People tried all sorts of remedies, but nothing worked. The breakthrough came not from a fancy lab, but from an ancient observation. People noticed that those who survived smallpox never got it again. They were immune. This led to a risky but sometimes effective practice called variolation. It involved taking pus from a smallpox sore and deliberately introducing it into a healthy person's body, usually through a small cut in the skin. The idea was to induce a milder form of the disease to build immunity. It was a huge gamble. While it often worked, the person could still develop a full-blown case of smallpox and die, or spread it to others. It was far from a perfect solution. Then, in the late 18th century, a country doctor in England named Edward Jenner made a revolutionary observation. He noticed that milkmaids who contracted a mild disease called cowpox from cows seemed to be protected from smallpox. Cowpox caused some sores on their hands, but it was nothing compared to the horrors of smallpox. Jenner decided to test his hypothesis. In 1796, in a move that would be ethically unthinkable today, he took pus from a cowpox sore on a milkmaid named Sarah Nelms and inoculated an 8-year-old boy named James Phipps. The boy developed a slight fever and felt a bit unwell for a couple of days, but he quickly recovered. Here comes the truly daring part. A few weeks later, Jenner exposed James Phipps directly to the smallpox virus. The boy didn't get sick. He was immune. Jenner had discovered a much safer way to protect people. He called his method vaccination, from the Latin word for cow, vacca. Jenner's discovery was one of the single most important breakthroughs in the history of medicine. Vaccination was far safer than variolation and offered a real weapon against smallpox. The practice spread, slowly at first, but then with increasing speed across the world. Over the next century and a half, vaccination campaigns helped to control smallpox in many parts of Europe and North America. But the disease continued to ravage other parts of the world. In the mid-20th century, smallpox was still a major threat in many countries in Asia, Africa, and South America. So, in 1967, the World Health Organization, or WHO, launched an ambitious, audacious plan: the Intensified Smallpox Eradication Program. The goal wasn't just to control smallpox, but to wipe it off the face of the earth entirely. This was a monumental undertaking. It was a global war against a virus. It required unprecedented international cooperation, bringing together scientists, doctors, and volunteers from all over the world, even during the height of the Cold War. They faced huge challenges: funding shortages, civil wars, logistical nightmares in remote areas, and cultural resistance. The strategy they used was called surveillance and containment, or ring vaccination. Instead of trying to vaccinate every single person on the planet, which was impossible, health workers focused on finding new cases of smallpox quickly. Once a case was identified, they would rush to the area and vaccinate everyone in the immediate vicinity: the person's family, their neighbors, their entire village, creating a ring of immunity around the infected person to stop the virus from spreading further. This required a massive network of healthcare workers, many of them local volunteers, who went door to door, village to village, in some of the most remote corners of the globe. They traveled by jeep, by boat, on foot, carrying a new piece of technology that made it all possible: the bifurcated needle. This was a simple, two-pronged steel needle that could be easily sterilized and reused. It held just the right amount of freeze-dried vaccine between its prongs and made vaccination quick and efficient. A single person could vaccinate hundreds of people in a day. The last naturally occurring case of smallpox was recorded in Somalia in 1977, in a hospital cook named Ali Mao Malin. He survived. After 2 more years of intense surveillance with no new cases found, the world held its breath. Then, on May 8, 1980, the World Health Organization made a historic announcement. For the first time in human history, a disease had been completely eradicated. Smallpox was gone. This is an incredible success story. The eradication of smallpox is arguably humanity's greatest public health achievement. It proves what we can accomplish when the world comes together to fight a common enemy. It saved an estimated 40 to 50 million lives in the decades since. It's a testament to science, to international cooperation, and to the dedication of thousands of healthcare workers who made it their life's mission. Today, the variola virus only exists in 2 high-security laboratories, one in the United States and one in Russia, kept for research purposes. The story of smallpox serves as a powerful reminder of how devastating infectious diseases can be, but also as a beacon of hope. It shows us that with ingenuity, determination, and global solidarity, we can overcome even the most daunting challenges. Thanks for joining me on this journey through history.